What is up, guys? I'm Yuvraj. Hope you're having a wonderful week. This is the second installment of Rendering for Design, a tutorial series where I walk you through my workflow for rendering products designed in SolidWorks using Cinema 4D and Redshift. Last time we looked at how I prepare my SolidWorks files for import into Cinema 4D, and in today's tutorial we'll be looking at how I go about texturing my model so all the materials are in the right places. So without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, cool. So I've imported my model into Cinema 4D here. You can see we've got the model in all of its glory. And the first thing I want to say is that Cinema 4D and SolidWorks are constantly evolving. So with every new update, the level of compatibility does shift. Sometimes it gets better, sometimes it gets worse. In recent years it has gotten better, however, you'll notice minor changes in the import procedure. Right now, not all of our materials have loaded in perfectly. You can see that, for example, we haven't got gold contacts applied. So the first thing I want to do is identify which materials are applied to which parts in geometry. Now, right upon import, Cinema 4D will automatically create materials and apply them to different parts of our geometry. It will do this as dictated by the material setting on our import settings. Invariably, this process will not be perfect, and we need to manually go in and dictate where certain materials need to be applied. Before we do that, I like to just poke around and understand what each of the pre-made materials actually are. You can normally tell what each material is by seeing where it's applied. In this case, we have 6 materials. We've got matte 6 and then 5 steels. Now, I'm convinced that none of these are actually steel, but if we poke around, we can start to see where the materials are applied and understand what they should be. To see all of the tags where a material is applied, we can right-click and click on Select Material Tags Objects. Doing that on this first material here called steel tells me that this is most likely the anodized aluminium look. So I'm going to rename this by just double-clicking on the name and typing in anodized aluminium. We can repeat these for the other materials, so just right-click, select material tags. I see this is on the headset jack, so I'm going to rename this to grey plastic. Do it again on this material, so select material tags. This is on the screws and the port. This is most likely actually steel. I'm going to rename this to stainless steel. And that'll just be like a shiny metallic appearance. Once again, do this on here. So this looks like it is applied to the display spacer. This is probably a black plastic spacer, and then if I right click on this, that's on the cover glass. This should be a glass material, and it kind of already has a transparent appearance anyway, so that just confirms that it's most likely glass. Each material has some key properties that define how it looks, and then some secondary properties that make some finer adjustments to its behavior. The most important for defining appearance from top to bottom are the base color, reflection roughness, and transmission. From afar, 9 times out of 10, these will have the biggest bearing on the appearance of your material. Base color is pretty self-explanatory. It defines the color that our material will reflect, the base color that it will appear to be to the camera before reflection, transmission, and any coatings, effects, etc. Reflection roughness simulates the micro bumpiness of our material, aligning or diffusing reflected rays for a smooth or rough appearance. You can think of it like the difference between anodized and polished aluminium, or satin and gloss paint. Transmission weight controls how transparent our material will be. You can make translucent or glass-like materials using this option. Redshift uses PBR-based materials and a node editor. We can see the nodes that make up our material by double-clicking on the material, and you're presented with the node editor. You can see by default we only have one node, that's the standard material, but we can add more if we'd like, and we will later on. You can use PBR maps to add texture to your materials. I'm not going to do a full explanation of the different maps and how they work, because frankly, that could be its own video, but I'll leave some links down below that explain PBR materials in more detail. If you'd like to see me explain how PBR maps work though, leave a comment and I'll explore making a video on the topic. We're going to tweak the base color, reflection roughness, and transmission weights of the different materials here to get them looking roughly right. Looking at my anodized aluminium material, I'm going to bring the color down. It's pretty light right now. Get it down to like more of like a mid-gray. And we can turn on our render view just to make sure that we're getting the right parameters, you know. I'm going to bring down the roughness just a little bit so we get some more reflection on there, and crank up the metalness all the way. It is a metal after all. Doing that gives me less reflection, so once again, maybe bringing up the color just a bit and turning up the roughness. That looks roughly in the ballpark of what I want, and the preview here looks all right as well, so I'm going to leave that. Now this grey plastic here, I'm going to bring the color down just a bit, maybe a bit more, so it's perhaps a bit closer matched to the body. Leave the roughness around there-ish. And that looks fine to me. None of these are see-through apart from the glass, so I'm going to ignore transmission for now. Doing the same thing for the stainless steel here. So again, metalness all the way up. We can zoom in perhaps. And I want this to be shinier, so I'm going to bring down the roughness. We'll probably have to lighten it up quite a bit. It is also worth keeping in mind that the lighting will drastically affect how these colors come out. So this stainless steel looks quite dark for now, but who knows, in different lighting it might come out a lot brighter. So we can fine tune the colors once we have our environment set up. Black plastic, I think, is largely fine looking at the numbers, but we zoom in a bit more. So we can use that view clipping trick to change the view clipping. Sweet. Yep, if we look at the plastic here, I think that's looking largely okay. Might increase the brightness a little bit on here. And maybe keep the roughness around 0.5. I don't think... I rarely keep my roughness above about 0.6, 0.7-ish. I don't find that many scenarios where I need to have the roughness that high. The glass, now obviously this will have a very low roughness, and we'll turn the transmission all the way up so that it is see-through, or maybe around almost 100%. So you can see we've got this glass appearance now here. I'm actually going to add an HDRi really quick. Now I'll cover this in more detail in the next episode, but for now, to add an HDRi environment, all we need to do is add a dome light. This will spam the entire scene with white light coming from all directions, and then you just want to navigate to somewhere where you downloaded an HDRi. There's plenty online to download for free. I'll link some down below. I've got a pack here which I got for free from somewhere, and if I find where this is from, I will link it below. Drag an HDRi, I think something with some harsh lighting could work, so maybe something like this to give us some interesting reflections. I don't want to see it in the background, so I'm going to uncheck background, and then hopefully it's just affecting the reflections and not the background. And I'm going to spin it around. Okay, cool. So we can see that the glass has like a decent reflection on it. It's not too shiny, not too matte. Material's looking all right. I think this aluminium's a bit too bright now. I'm going to turn it down just a bit and turn down the roughness. I do want a bit more definition in the reflections from this. Okay, I think that's looking good for now. Now it's almost guaranteed that upon import, you won't have all your materials applied perfectly. An example here is the gold that should be applied to our charging port pins and the headphone jack pins. And I'm also pretty sure that we haven't got the shiny aluminium on our side button or the plastic bands for our antenna bands. This is okay, and it's going to change as the SolidWorks Cinema 4D import procedure evolves. We're almost always going to have to do some manual fine-tuning, and keep in mind that this isn't dynamic, so if you change your SolidWorks file, you will have to redo this process 9 times out of 10. There are certain cases where if your geometry is identical, you can just copy over tags and the polygons will realign themselves. Generally, if you want to import something into Cinema 4D, make sure it's your final version. Procedure for selectively applying materials to certain geometries is actually rather straightforward. Just involves selecting certain faces and then telling Cinema 4D to apply materials only to those faces. I'm going to start off with the charging port. In the case of the charging port, if I dig down into the tree, I actually have separate bodies for the different pins, so this is pretty straightforward. All I have to do is apply the stainless steel to the outside geometry. I'm going to rename this port body, and then I'm going to group all of these into a null and call that null pins. Now I can make a new material from scratch, however I'm going to use the stainless steel as a starting point, holding down Control, and if I just drag out, this will make a new version of the same material, and I'm going to call this gold. Change the color to something a bit warmer, and then apply this to the pins. You'll see that we've got a gold appearance. It's not that gold, so maybe I could add some more saturation to the color to really make it obvious that this is a gold part. There we go. Maybe bring down the roughness so it's really shiny and polished, like these gold contacts ought to be. Cool. There's our gold applied there. That was pretty straightforward. I don't anticipate it being this straightforward for other bits. If we look inside our headphone jack, it says headset jack here. In this case, we'll have to select individual faces, which is fine. I'm going to pause the render view because it's not important right now. And to select the faces, what we can do is do a polygon selection. I'm going to hold down Shift to keep adding and select more polygons. And once again, holding Shift down, I'm going to select some more polygons. So these are the 3 contacts all selected now. And you can verify that just by orbiting round. A bit too ambitious with that orbit. Let's come inside, and you can see if we look from all the different angles, we've selected the faces that make up the 3 pins. So that's cool. Now to tell Cinema 4D that we want to store this selection or save the selection and then refer to it for a new material, all we have to do is come into Select at the top, click Store Selection. I'm going to name this Pins. And let's actually make another selection. So once again, coming down, Store Selection. Oop, Select. Store Selection. I'm going to name this Plastic. And what we can do is select all of these. I'll click Control A to select all of the faces. I'm going to come into Plastic and I'm going to click Deselect so that we're deselecting the stored selection, and then I'm going to click Update. And so we have one selection. That is, if I double click the pin selection, we've got one selection that's just the pins and one selection that's everything else. So I can now come into the gray plastic tag and tell it to use the plastic selection. I can now also apply a gold material tag here and tell it just to apply that to the pins by dragging pins or just using the picker. If I now re-enable our render view, you'll see that the pins on the inside of the headphone jack are gold and the rest of the body is plastic. So we can repeat this for the other parts of our geometry. If I want to select the shiny part of this button, perhaps I might use I might use the brush selection, come in and just make sure that all of the polygons I want to select are selected. And then zoom out. The smaller your polygons, the higher your chance of missing them for some reason in Cinema 4D. It's pretty straightforward, you just have to zoom in and then select them. That's all selected. I'm going to come into select, hit store selection. I'm going to name this shiny. And then hit Control A to select all of the faces. Select store selection. Hit shiny, hit deselect, and then update my main selection, and let's call this main, or maybe I'll call this anodized. And then it's a case of applying anodized only where we want it, and maybe we'll make a new material, so again holding control, dragging out, and just bringing down that roughness for those aligned reflections, and dragging in shiny. So you can see we've got this sort of shiny look on this part of our button. That's a bit too shiny for some reason. It just looks eerily CGI. So let's bring that up. Okay, that's looking better. And I'm going to repeat this for the other parts, like the antenna bands now. So don't be afraid to use the other views as well. They might be helpful. So middle mouse button and drag, and you should be able to just find the polygons you want. I'm going to use polygon selection. To select all of the polygons, coming in and holding shift. If at any point you make a mistake in any of your selections, then that's fine. You can hit Control Z or Command Z if you're on Mac, and that will take you back a step in your selection journey. I'm going to then select all the stuff in the shell, so Control A, come on. Select, store selection, make this anodized, and then this will be antenna bands. If I then tell it to only apply the anodized aluminium to the anodized material tag, and if I come into grey plastic, apply the grey plastic material, and tell it to apply that just to the antenna bands, that's that. And finally I'm going to decorate the logo as well. For this I'm going to use the brush selection. Coming into shell and just selecting those polygons that make up the logo. Which isn't actually that many. That's done. Hit select, store selection. I'm going to call this logo. I'm going to select all of them. Come into logo, deselect, and then update that selection. I'm going to drag in the shiny anodized aluminium appearance and tell it just to apply that to the logo. So we've got this cool logo appearance that's a bit shinier than the rest of the body. Now that we've added all of our materials, you can see that actually we don't need this top level mat 6. It looks like that was just added to our overall model for some reason as part of the import process, but we can remove that. And then coming into tools, if we're going to edit over here, we can delete any unused materials. Now, like I promised in the last episode, we're going to add rounding to all of our materials to give them that photorealistic look. So to add rounding, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to come into the node editor, double click on any space for the material and search for round corners. When we find it, here we go. And all we have to do is drag this to our bump map. And wow, that looks awful. Not to worry though. By default, the radius is 0.5, so that's 0.5 centimeters in this case because our project units are centimeters. If you know, that's enormous. That's a pretty big radius. So we're going to shrink this down to maybe, let's say, 0.2 millimeters, which will be 0.02 centimeters, or 0.02. That's looking better. Still think it's a bit too big, so maybe we can take it down to half of that, so 0.1 millimeters. Getting there, I think we can do with a bit finer if we have some precision manufacturing capabilities. So 0.05 or 0.07 maybe. Really just dialing in that radius. You can see it's looking pretty good. We can go ahead and do this for all of our materials. I'm just going to copy this node. So if we just select the node round corners, hit Control-C or Command-C on a Mac, and then let's go into our plastic appearance, grey plastic, and this 0.07 number is a good starting point. You can see our plastic's also been rounded now. Let's just have a look at our antenna bands, see what the deal is there. Good, so because they're part of the same geometry, they haven't been rounded. I'm actually going to go back into our anodized aluminium material and reduce the radius even further. Same for our plastic. I think the radius can be even smaller, maybe about a third of where we're at right now, so 0.002. It's looking better to me. I'm going to go back into display and turn on Guro shading. Guro. Where's the gold? Okay, so we can apply this to our gold as well. There we go. Now on the stainless steel, this is too high again, 0.02 maybe. It's looking better. We'll copy this as our new starting point for rounding corners. Add it, drag it to our bump map. And we're starting to get that really cool, realistic, photorealistic look. What's left? Maybe on the black plastic display spacer. We can totally add that. Gonna make this a bit larger. Cool. Let's just zoom into our display spacer. Okay, I think we can do with a smaller number there. Oop. We can turn it down a little bit. That's looking good. And most exciting of all now, we can apply it to our glass material. And get some really lovely edge reflections on that glass. Oh, doesn't it look glorious? A bit monochrome, you might argue, but it is a silver device. We can make a black colorway by just lowering the brightness, I guess, of our aluminium. We can make it red if we want to. Might make mine blue. Maybe like a pastel blue. And then we'll make the steel colored to match the 204 degrees. We can see the grey plastic is quite discordant in its hue. So we can change that. That looks very well matched. What else do we have left? We have the black plastic here. I think we can lower the brightness of this black so it is closer to a black. And there we have it. We can also rotate our product. If we come back to our object selection mode, hit R on our keyboard, we get the rotate gizmo. And we can tweak the angle of the product so that we get some cool reflections perhaps. So this is looking good, I think. Yeah. And if we zoom in, we'll see our lovely rounded corners, some nice details on our product right there. So that's largely it, guys. We looked at how to identify which materials are applied by default to your project upon import. We then covered how you can change those materials to make them look more like what you want them to be. Basic properties such as base color, reflection roughness, and transmission weight. We delved into how you might selectively apply materials to certain parts of your geometry using polygon selection tags. And as promised, we also did apply rounding to our geometry so that we get those nice, cool micro reflections on the edges of our geometry. So that about does it for today's video. If you found this video helpful, then I'd really appreciate you dropping a like below. And if you're into rendering or that kind of stuff, then get subscribed. We're going to be exploring some cool new rendering tools going forward, as long as more tutorials just like this one. And that's a wrap. I hope to see you in the next video.